Hello, glad you can join us on this gunslinging video. Today, we'll go through a very easy to make and simple to use build for Thief class. We'll utilize the Steel skill to give us high damage, some healing to the user, and grant boons on use. For a live example of the build, I'll run through a common item grinding spot to display it in action. The idea of this build is to keep a far distance away from the enemy while dealing as much damage in a short period of time. We'll want to avoid as many cooldown times as we can to achieve the most consistent damage outputs. I made this build with inspiration from Queen Jenna after seeing her essentially erasing some enemies in the storyline with a blink.
She lifted her arm up and the enemies were defeated instantaneously.
I thought to myself, oh, I can do that. So thank you, Queen Jenna, for the inspiration. As you can see in this video, we have Alistia casually walking around the area blinking enemies out of existence. This was done without pressing any keys besides F1 and F2, while maintaining auto attack set to 1 or 3 skill. It's good to have auto attack for one of these two skills, depending on the difficulty of the area, as the character will attack an enemy as soon as they are within shooting range of them. Within a short period of time, you'll be able to see a line of enemies being dropped within seconds apart at minimal effort. In lower level regions, this will instantly destroy your target without any auto attacks. Now that we've seen a working example of it, let's get into how to build it. We'll start by building into the Deadly Arts line. This will grant the Steel skill Poison effect for a slight boost to our damage. Each hit of Steel will grant 2 stacks of poison to the enemy. We'll want to select Mug for the next skill. Mug will grant more damage with Steel and also heal the user for a couple thousand health each use. The Lotus Poison will give weakness to the enemy. This is going to work alongside another skill we're going to go through shortly. Then we have Even the Odds, which will be a must-have for stacking more damage to the enemy. Vulnerability will deal 1% extra damage to the enemy per stack to a maximum of 25 stacks. We'll make good use out of the exposed weakness, since it'll give added damage based on the amount of unique conditions the enemy has. 2% damage per condition will stack up nicely when you inflict 3 to 5 conditions with Steel. Finally, we have the Improvisation, which will let us use the Steel skill twice per use. With this tree, we'll have an added 20% damage increase to the enemy, assuming we only inflict 20 vulnerability stacks, with another 6% for having conditions, on top of another 1500 to 1600 damage per hit on Steel, and healing you for about 2000 health per enemy. That's a great start, and we've only done the first trait line so far. Moving on to the next one, we'll assign Trickery. The first skill, Kleptomaniac, will grant 2 initiative each time you use Steel. This will help with keeping your pistol skills in good flow. Thrill of the Crime will grant the user and nearby allies boons for increasing your power, condition damage, and critical hit rate for 10 seconds. The Preparedness skill will increase your maximum initiative by 3 and give you 1500 expertise. Bountiful Theft will grant more boons when you steal. You'll steal up to 3 boons from an enemy and give them to yourself along with Vigor, and if the enemy has no boons at all, you'll still give Vigor and 5 stacks of Might to nearby allies. The Lead Attack skill will help greatly as it gives you 15% increased damage, with an added 1% damage for each initiative spent, and reduces the recharge rate of Steel by 15%. Deadly Ambush will work together with Exposed Weakness by adding another 2% damage for having another unique condition. Now we'll inflict Poison, Bleeding, Vulnerability, and Weakness with Steel, and Bleeding does an extra 25% damage. Now that we've got the base 2 traits set, we'll move on to the final step, which will vary depending on if you're a free-to-play user or a premium user. We'll start with premium users using the Deadeye trait line. Deadeye's Mark will mark a target when you use Steel. This will allow the user to use rifles as well, and grant bonus effects to the enemy when your Malice maxes out. This will help greatly against enemies which take a harder beating. One in the Chamber will make our cantrip skills give us a random Steel skill, and deals an added 25% damage with Steel skills. This doesn't let you use Steel again, just a random skill that Steel gives you. Renewing Gaze will trigger when you defeat an enemy with the Mark. This will recharge the Steel skill, allowing you to use it immediately after your target is defeated. The added healing is a bonus too. Payback goes well with Renewing Gaze as it'll reduce the recharge rate of skills by 20%. This is great when dealing with the mob control, as you can cycle through your skills before boons wear away. The Iron Sight will let you deal an extra 10% damage to marked targets and reduce the damage you receive from them by 15%. Finally, we have Be Quick or Be Killed, which will give you 200 power and 200 precision while granting you the Quickness boon. This will allow you to use your rifle and pistol attacks much faster. Alternatively, if you're a free-to-play user, you can swap the Deadeye trait for Critical Strikes. This will complement the Berserker gear set we're using for maximum damage output. Keen Observer will increase your critical strike hit ratio by 10% and 5% furthermore if you are above 50% health. Twin Fangs will increase your critical hit damage by 5% with an added 2% critical hit damage if you're above 50% health. Flanking an enemy will land critical hit at a 7% higher chance as well. With Unrelenting Strikes, you can grant Fury to yourself and allies around you. This has an 8-second cooldown, but stacks well with other traits, giving you Fury all the time. Deadly Aim will make your pistols and harpoons deal 10% more damage, as well as pierce an enemy, hitting multiple lined-up targets. With Ferocious Strikes, you'll deal another 10% damage to enemies above 50% health. And lastly, to maintain the Fury stack, we have No Quarter, granting Fury every 2 seconds when landing a critical hit, and adding a passive 250 Ferocity for more critical damage. So that's it for the traits. We've got this nice solid build ready to go. But now we need the skills to match it. Starting left and working to the right, we have Healing Skill. This is best with either of the options Hide in Shadows or Withdraw, as they both grant heal and remove conditions. I personally prefer Hide in Shadows since you can get a triple shot with your pistol's primary strike, and it'll cure any damaging conditions inflicted onto you. Next we have Mercy. This will be important to have since it can instantly kick us out of any stun-locking conditions or effects. Perfect for when you are knocked down and need to get up quickly. It also recovers your initiative for each stack of malice you have, allowing for further attack use. The next two are going to be the passive skills for increasing your power and precision. Assassin's Signet and Signet of Agility will help a lot for passive boost to damage and critical hit chance. And last we have our cantrip skill, Shadow Meld. This works alongside the One in the Chamber ability we've got, granting us a random steal skill to use. This skill can be used twice and cloaks the user on each use, giving us that triple shot from our primary pistol. And that's it. With this build, you can easily walk your way through the open world defeating various enemies at a distance while putting little effort into combat. I hope you find this helpful, and happy huntings!